We're going to do something called the squeeze test. This will help you figure out if your compost is too dry, too wet, or just right. We're looking for the texture or consistency to be about 60% moisture, which you can tell with a moisture meter, or you can do a simple test. It should be about the texture of a damp, wrung out sponge. So the top of your compost is going to be drier no matter what. So what I want you to do is go ahead and push this aside, and notice that I am wearing gloves. It doesn't matter if you are barehanded or wearing gloves. You're not testing the compost with your hands. You're testing it for, you're squeezing it. So I'm going to take just a small handful, and I can tell right away that it's pretty crumbly. There's also a worm in there. I don't want to squeeze him. So you're going to squeeze it firmly in your hand. When you open your hand, it should clump together like Play-Doh or clay. And you would ideally like to see just a little bit of moisture come out in between your fingers. I'm opening my hand and it's starting to clump together a little bit, but I'd like to see it clumping together more. This compost is also not quite done. I can tell because there's so much that is not broken down in here, and that's okay. You can still test the moisture even in not finished compost, but it is good to wear gloves so that you're not getting any funky stuff on your hands. So this compost is too dry. I'm going to add some water to it because that will help it break down better.
When you're doing your squeeze test, you'll take a small handful of your compost and you'll squeeze it firmly in your hand. This compost here is too dry. I can tell because all of the pieces fell apart. There was no clumping together. There is no evidence that there was enough moisture for anything to stick together. This compost looks and feels very dry. This compost here was too wet. I squeezed a handful of it and water just poured out from between my fingers. Not just a drop, but an actual pretty steady drizzle from in between all of my fingers. That compost is too dry. I should leave it with the top off, with the lid off, so some water can evaporate. And if it was really wet, you could even consider mixing some more carbon in if necessary. For example, if your compost got 6 inches of rain added to it, or you accidentally left the hose running overnight, you might want to add some brown materials to that, or at least let the sun evaporate that extra water off. This compost here is just right. It's clumped together. You can see, even though it's not done, a lot of the materials are stuck together kind of like a chunky Play-Doh or clay. There was a tiny drop or two that squeezed from in between my fingers, and that lets me know that my compost is at about the right moisture level. Keep in mind that the more you pay attention to the moisture level of your compost, the more quickly it will break down. Dry compost means your compost organisms don't have enough to drink, and they're not going to work very fast. In fact, some of them even may go dormant or even enter more of a slow eating phase. And if those organisms are not actively composting, your compost is just sitting there, and that will make your compost take a lot longer to break down.